Locked with monsters, brutal prison bullying, and the food they force inmates to eat. Smash that subscribe button, hit like if you can handle the truth, and drop a comment if you think you know how dark this gets, because once this door closes, there's no turning back. The call came in just before dawn, the hour when prisons are supposed to be quiet. At Grey Ridge Correctional, a concrete fortress buried in the American Midwest, an inmate had been found collapsed on the floor of Unit D's dining corridor. No witnesses. No cameras working. Just a man barely breathing, his prison-issued tray overturned beside him, congealed oatmeal bleeding into the cracks of the tile like evidence someone had tried to erase. By the time Internal Affairs arrived, the unit was already locked down. Inmates stood cuffed, eyes forward, faces blank. Correctional Officer Daniel Reese, 6 years on the job and already exhausted by it, kept repeating the same line. He just dropped. No fight. No noise. But the medics said otherwise. The victim, Marcus Hale, 32, serving a short sentence for nonviolent fraud, had bruises in places that suggested pressure, not punches. Control, not chaos. Detective Laura Mendez had seen this pattern before, in county jails and federal lockups from Arizona to upstate New York. It was never the loud inmates who broke first. It was the quiet ones. The men who kept their heads down, who didn't know the rules no one ever wrote down. Hale was one of them. New to Grey Ridge. Assigned to kitchen duty. Easy access to food, and that made him valuable. As Mendez dug into Hale's file, a strange detail surfaced. 3 weeks earlier, he had requested a transfer out of Unit D, citing ongoing threats related to meals. The request had been denied. Staffing shortages. No available beds. Another form stamped and forgotten. In interviews, inmates told the same half-story. Food shortages. Spoiled meat. Meals that arrived cold or not at all. But between the lines was something else, an economy built on hunger. Stronger inmates controlling trays. Forcing weaker ones to trade silence for scraps. The kitchen, meant to sustain, had become a weapon. Then a guard quietly slipped Mendez a maintenance report. The kitchen's freezer logs had been altered. Temperatures changed by hand. Dates scratched out. Someone inside was manipulating more than just inmates. When investigators finally reviewed the footage from a supposedly dead camera outside the pantry, one frame flickered to life. It showed Marcus Hale, tray in hand, standing face-to-face with someone who wasn't supposed to be there. And when they zoomed in on who it was, the case stopped being about bullying and started becoming something far worse. The man standing across from Marcus Hale in that frozen frame wasn't an inmate. He was wearing gray, not orange. A correctional officer. And not just any officer, Daniel Reese. Detective Mendez replayed the footage again and again, watching Hale's shoulders tense as Reese leaned in, close enough to whisper. There was no audio, but the body language said everything. Hale wasn't arguing. He was pleading. The timestamp showed it was 2 nights before Hale collapsed. Reese was pulled in for questioning immediately. He didn't deny being near the pantry. He said he was doing a routine check, that Hale had approached him about spoiled food. He was paranoid, Reese claimed. Kitchen rumors. Inmates exaggerate. But when asked why his access badge had been used to override the freezer controls that same night, his jaw tightened just slightly. Not enough for a confession. Enough to notice. As the investigation widened, a pattern emerged that stretched far beyond Grey Ridge. Reports from a UK local jail showed similar complaints, food withheld as punishment, threats delivered through trusted inmates, guards looking the other way. In Australia, an oversight report described a kitchen supervisor who resigned abruptly after an inmate died of complications linked to malnutrition. Different countries. Same playbook. At Grey Ridge, inmates began disappearing from Unit D's roster. Not transfers. Not releases. Administrative moves, according to paperwork signed by Reese and his supervisor. One inmate, Eli Turner, had filed a grievance mentioning Hale by name, claiming they were both being pressured to adjust portions and stay quiet. Turner was now in solitary, officially for his own protection. Unofficially, no one had seen him in days. Mendez pushed for a welfare check. What they found rattled even the hardened officers. Turner was alive, but barely. He whispered one sentence before medics sedated him. "It wasn't the inmates running it. We just did the dirty work." That was when the case turned dangerous. A box of kitchen records vanished from evidence storage overnight. The officer on duty swore it had been logged in. Surveillance showed a familiar figure entering the room after hours, someone who knew the blind spots. Someone trusted. As pressure mounted, Mendez received an anonymous message on her secure line. No name. Just a warning. Stop digging into the food program, or you'll end up like Hale. Attached was a photo taken inside the prison kitchen, time-stamped less than an hour earlier. It showed trays lined up for breakfast. Every single one identical, except one, marked subtly with a scratched corner. Mendez understood immediately. Someone was still sending messages, still controlling who ate and who paid for it. And Marcus Hale's collapse was only the beginning. By the third week, Grey Ridge no longer felt like a prison under investigation. It felt like a crime scene still in motion. Detective Mendez ordered the food program suspended, replacing hot meals with sealed rations brought in from outside vendors. The reaction was immediate. Fights broke out in units that had been quiet for years. Informants went silent. Someone scrawled a message on a cafeteria wall before dawn. "You can't starve the truth out of us." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Daniel Reese was placed on administrative leave, but that only peeled back the first layer. Financial records showed unexplained deposits into accounts tied to 2 kitchen contractors and 1 senior custody supervisor. The amounts were small, spread out, designed to look like overtime mistakes. But when mapped against incident reports, they aligned perfectly with lockdowns, transfers, and disciplinary write-ups targeting the same group of inmates: new arrivals, nonviolent offenders, and anyone assigned near food storage. Then Eli Turner died. The official cause was listed as medical complications. The timing was wrong. The autopsy revealed severe dehydration and electrolyte imbalance, conditions consistent with prolonged food manipulation. Turner had been silenced without a bruise, erased by policy and neglect. When the report reached Mendez's desk, the margins were already smudged with redactions. Pressure came from above. A call from the State Department warned her to stay within scope. Another suggested the deaths were tragic but isolated. But Mendez had learned the language. Isolated meant buried. Scope meant silence. A break came from an unexpected place: the prison's night sanitation crew. A janitor named Paul Hensley admitted he'd been paid to clean the freezer drains after midnight, to wash away spoiled meat and chemical residue. He handed over a burner phone he'd been given for instructions. The last message read, "Switch trays. Blue mark goes last." Blue. Not scratched. Mendez rushed to evidence and rechecked the photo from the anonymous tip. Under enhanced contrast, the scratched tray wasn't random damage. It was pigment. Blue dye, used in kitchen inventory tagging, deliberately hidden beneath grime. They traced the system backward: inventory codes, shift logs, meal routes, and the picture sharpened. Trays marked for problem inmates were being altered. Portions reduced. Ingredients swapped. In rare cases, meals were tainted just enough to weaken, not kill. Control through attrition. The mastermind wasn't Reese. It was the supervisor who approved every kitchen change, every transfer, every denial. A man celebrated for keeping order during budget cuts. A man scheduled to retire in 2 weeks with full benefits. When Mendez went to arrest him, his office was empty. His badge lay on the desk. His phone was still warm. And in Unit D, breakfast trays were already rolling out. The carts reached Unit D before the lockdown order could clear the chain of command. Breakfast trays slid through slots, metal on metal, the sound echoing like a countdown. Detective Mendez ran the corridor with officers behind her, shouting for inmates to stop eating, to push the trays back out. Some listened. Some didn't. Hunger had taught them not to trust sudden mercy. In the supervisor's abandoned office, investigators found the ledger hidden behind a false panel. Not money, power. Names, dates, and notes written in a calm, managerial hand. Non-compliant. Winner. Transfer denied. Each entry matched a kitchen adjustment, a tray mark, a disciplinary write-up that looked routine on paper and lethal in practice. Food wasn't just withheld. It was calibrated. Enough to weaken, enough to break, enough to make men desperate enough to police each other. They found him an hour later at a rest stop 3 miles off the highway, sitting alone in his car, uniform folded neatly on the passenger seat. He didn't run. He didn't argue. He asked for water. When cuffs closed around his wrists, he said only one thing. They were already monsters. I just locked the doors. The trial never became the spectacle it should have been. Plea agreements. Sealed settlements. The state admitted to systemic failures without naming them. Reese testified, hollow-eyed, about the blind spots and the pressure to keep numbers down and noise quiet. Contractors paid fines without admitting wrongdoing. Ridge replaced its kitchen staff and installed new cameras that everyone promised would stay on. Marcus Hale survived. He walked out months later thinner, quieter, carrying a box with his prison-issued Bible and a folded grievance form he never submitted. He declined interviews. When asked why, he said the truth had already been eaten. Across the Atlantic, inspectors in a UK jail reopened files. In Australia, a corrections report quietly changed its language. The pattern was no longer invisible, but it wasn't gone either. Hunger is cheap. Silence is cheaper. On Mendez's desk, long after the case closed, sat one last envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photo, a clean cafeteria, new trays stacked in perfect rows. No marks. No scratches. On the back, a sentence written carefully, as if by someone who knew how systems worked. Monsters don't disappear. They get promoted. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the doors close again.